This segment brought to you by Kansas Farm Bureau, the voice of agriculture. To join today or for more information, go to kfb.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome to Farm Factor. Kyle Bauer is at the Risk and Profit Conference with K-State economist Dan OBrien.
Hi, this is Kyle Bauer. I got an opportunity to visit with Dan OBrien at the Risk and Profit Conference at Kansas State University. And Dan, of course, is an agri-economist with Kansas State University. And we want to talk corn right now. As I listened to your talk, Dan, that was where I was the most startled because of the potential of corn going up.
Yes, when you crunch through the numbers on what final U.S. harvested acres are, and that's after all these adjustments that'll inevitably have to be made for cover crops, for more silage than normal, and for all the muddy pockets and issues that have to be dealt with back in those eastern states and some states to the north. USDA's projection for planted was about a little over 90 million acres. We're probably going to end up 88.5. Lower than normal harvested to planted acres. Figure probably 88% lowest in at least 10, 15 years, given all these issues. So you're looking at 79 some million acres harvested. Yields. We've got both the USDA number came in at 169.5. We've had different crop tours that are out there now that have come in consistently, sharply lower than that, and looking at numbers 165, 163, thereabouts for a national yield on average. Kind of, as you and I have talked, it's kind of a classic east versus west corn belt. In fact, maybe it's a western corn belt versus north and east because they've got problems all the way through many of those states. And what I've talked about by the time I crunch numbers, there's a significant chance that the USDA's figure of 13.9 billion bushels is probably could end up at 12.5 to 12.9, and that's a billion or more off the market. You have some rationing of usage and all that, but USDA projected 360. We crunch back to that and still maintain 1.5 to 1.25 billion bushels stocks. You're looking at 405 to 450, something like that for corn prices. So if that works out, that would be a shock to the corn market and would reverberate to these other grain markets too.
And you mentioned the east versus west, and it really appears that Kansas specifically and probably Nebraska will have very good crops, but with Illinois being short and your numbers showing planting dates and maturities and frost dates appeal that it's very difficult for Illinois to raise a reasonable crop. The basis is going to be really odd this year.
Well, and it's in those eastern Corn Belt states, one thing that stands out that we talked about this morning was the basis bids at ethanol plants, not just level, 60, 70 cents over the September contract. And you could say, well, gosh, maybe that's farmers just holding off and trying to get the best that they can. But I think it's just as much, if not more, those ethanol plants looking around the landscape and saying, we don't have a lot of corn coming, so we better get what we can right now. And 70, 80 cent basis bid over is a pretty strong basis bid.
Well, and it's just so odd. But, a lot of people in Kansas are corn buyers, not sellers. As I listened, I thought, gosh, if I have a need for a lot of corn over the next year, 6 months, this is probably the best they're going to do over the next year.
Buyers are at risk in this scenario, and get exacerbated if we don't have a normal or late fall. An early fall, that the corn supply number just gets worse. So buyers of grain are at risk they're motivated by buying reasonably priced grain, and what's coming in the next several months as we keep working through these USDA reports. And the actualities of harvest they're posing a much greater than normal risk to them of prices moving higher. Of course, the sellers they call that opportunity, but the buyers, that's a risk.
We're visiting with Dan OBrien with Kansas State University. We've been talking corn and the potential for the next year. This is Kyle Bauer reporting.
Thanks, Kyle. Folks, come back after these messages for this week's Kansas Soybean Update.